Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez faced the President of the United States and delivered the line she had rehearsed for the cameras, the crowd, and the platforms. She noted that both of them were children of queens, yet only one had truly lived there while the other had grown up behind his father's fence, shielded by wealth and distance. The room exploded because the sentence was engineered for virality and spoken with the smile of someone who already believed the moment belonged to her. Shares multiplied by the thousands before she even settled back into her seat, and for several seconds, the confrontation was hers alone. Then Donald Trump laughed. Not the tight, defensive laugh of a politician absorbing a hit, but the easy laugh of a man who had heard the attack and immediately recognized the opening it created. That laugh altered the atmosphere because it refused her the reaction she needed. Without that reaction, the insult began to shrink. Political attacks of her kind rely on visible injury, an interruption, a defensive explanation, any sign that the target has accepted the frame. Trump accepted none of it. He treated the line as an invitation to compare records, knowledge, and results on the very ground she had chosen. He answered, "Two kids from Queens, she's right, but only one of the two knows the crime rate in Queens right now, and it's not her." In a single sentence, the exchange ceased to be about fences, chauffeurs, and class resentment and became a test of whether the congresswoman who had built her identity around Queens actually knew her own district. The reversal struck harder because this was not a sterile Washington committee room where failure could be buried under procedure. This was Queens dressed with flowers, new carpet, television lights, and the warmth of a convention center pretending to be a neighborhood gathering. AOC had opened with the Q44 bus, the corner bodega, the elevated train, and the apartment window that would not close. Every detail selected to prove an intimacy Trump could never purchase. She spoke as the bartender who became a congresswoman, leaning forward, moving, using posture to make motion look like authenticity. Trump did not contest her memories. He contested her numbers, and memories cannot rescue a politician who does not know the numbers. She named Jamaica estates, the private drive, the security guard, and the father whose money had supposedly insulated Trump from the borough. She told him not to lecture her about Queens, because in her telling, he had only viewed it through glass while she had lived the daily reality in front of them. The audience rewarded the performance. It sounded like class revenge spoken in the language of local pride, and for a moment, it seemed flawless. Trump did not deny the fence, pretend he had grown up poor, or defend privileges everyone already knew he possessed. He said his father had built thousands of apartments for working families, placing buildings, doors, and keys across Queens, then forced the audience to set that record beside AOC's speeches, posts, and slogans. That distinction shifted the argument from biography to production, from where each person had started to what each had actually built. Trump framed his family's record in concrete terms and reduced AOC's with the line, "One built, one posted." The laughter moved across the room, first among people who had arrived neutral, then into the sections that had cheered her opening attack only moments earlier. Her supporters had applauded the setup, but the setup had become his, revealing how fragile a viral victory becomes when the target refuses to play the wounded man. AOC had tried to make privilege the entire case, yet Trump turned the case toward output, responsibility, and whether her fame had produced anything Queens could actually use. He raised a printed page and entered the territory she had failed to prepare for, the place where performance becomes vulnerable, because numbers do not care about branding. He said crime in her district had risen 70% since she took office, attributed the figure to FBI reporting, and invited her to check it that night. Whether the room liked him or hated him mattered less than the fact that he had attached a specific number to a specific district under a specific representative. Then he asked, "Congresswoman, what's the crime rate in your district right now?" The question was short, direct, and impossible to bury beneath another speech because it demanded knowledge, not outrage, identity, or another story about riding the bus before dawn. AOC opened her mouth, stopped, tried again, and searched for an answer that should not have required searching. The silence grew more damaging because the question concerned the district she invoked constantly and used as proof of authenticity. She had come prepared to explain Queens to Trump, yet she could not state the number he had just placed before millions of viewers. The failure did not look technical. It looked like a representative discovering on live television that she knew the language of the district better than its condition. People in the gallery did not need to support Trump to grasp the difference between a politician who speaks about them and one who knows what is happening to them. A woman in a diner uniform leaned forward. not cheering, not laughing, simply watching as confidence turned into doubt. That reaction mattered more than partisan applause, because doubt fractures political loyalty long before anger does and cannot be redirected toward another enemy. Trump repeated the 70% figure and tied it to AOC's tenure, forcing the room to measure her certainty against her factual emptiness. She had mocked the fence to prove Trump did not know Queens. Yet within minutes, the man behind it appeared to know her district better than its representative. As Trump prepared to move from Queens to Munich, from the crime rate she could not name to the foreign policy answer she could not finish, the audience understood that her opening attack had not wounded him. It had simply handed him the map. He moved from Queens to Munich without allowing the room to reset because the weakness he had exposed was not limited to one missing statistic. He raised the February Security Conference and the question AOC had received about whether America should defend Taiwan if China invaded. Every serious national figure should have considered that issue before stepping onto an international stage. Yet her answer dissolved into hesitations and abandoned clauses. Trump did not paraphrase it, exaggerate it, or hide behind interpretation. He read the transcript exactly as she had delivered it. Accuracy proved more damaging than mockery because it left no escape route except denying her own recorded words. He repeated the ums, the vague references to long-standing policy, and the verbal searching that revealed how little command stood behind the confidence. 7 stumbles in 40 seconds became more than nervousness when the subject involved China, Taiwan, American troops, and possible war. AOC tried to dismiss the embarrassment as sarcasm, but sarcasm about competence does not become sophisticated simply because it is posted afterward. Trump reminded the room that she had called herself a silly girl after appearing before world leaders measuring American seriousness. He said they believed her, and that word landed harder than another insult because it converted her joke into international judgment. AOC's posture shifted in details the cameras caught while she tried to maintain the face of resistance. Her hand tightened against the chair, her chin dropped slightly, and the energy behind her opening attack began to look increasingly manufactured. The room had watched her claim superior knowledge of Queens, then failed to state the crime rate in her district. Now it heard a second example of certainty collapsing when a basic question required a direct answer instead of performance. What had looked like one bad moment was becoming a pattern of ambition, moving faster than preparation. Trump then shifted from competence to hypocrisy and chose the subject AOC used against everyone else: wealth, privilege, and elite excess. He cited her February 2025 claim that she commuted to Washington by rail or commercial flight, a carefully maintained image. Then he placed that claim beside her April appearance in Bakersfield, where she stepped from a Bombardier Challenger private jet during the Fight Oligarchy tour. The aircraft cost $15,000 an hour, making the slogan sound less like principle and more like satire. Trump said he had flown privately for years, but at least he did not rename luxury as resistance. The laughter landed because the evidence sat inside the joke and could not be separated from it. Fighting oligarchy from a private jet summarized the contradiction without requiring a speech, an investigation, or partisan interpretation. Trump was not claiming that every private flight proved corruption. He was exposing the hypocrisy of condemning elite indulgence while choosing it. He called private flying Tuesday because he had never pretended to live like an ordinary commuter carrying a suitcase through Penn Station. AOC's brand required the audience to ignore what it could see, and the room was no longer willing to cooperate. Trump continued with $53,500 in campaign-funded luxury hotels and a reported $3,500 night at the Vdara in Las Vegas. He knew the property, the market, and what that price represented because luxury hotels were his native business language. That rate did not resemble sacrifice by a working-class advocate. It resembled the habits of the people she attacked. The room laughed when Trump said oligarchs stayed at the Vdara along with congresswomen who claimed to be fighting them. Again, the punchline worked because the financial record had written it before he spoke. Then came the staff email demanding nothing below 4 stars, a detail that exposed expectation rather than an isolated travel decision. One expensive room can be blamed on security, scheduling, availability, or convenience. A written standard for 4-star accommodations shows luxury had become the rule, not the exception. Trump focused on thread count, drawing on decades in the hotel business to explain what kind of customer makes that demand. The bartender identity suddenly looked less like current reality and more like an old costume preserved for campaign appearances. His argument was not that someone who once worked a service job must remain uncomfortable forever. It was that AOC used working-class hardship as a moral weapon while insulating herself with donor-funded standards most workers could never afford. She built authority by insisting she never forgot where she came from, yet the record suggested she remembered the imagery better than the habits. Queens appeared loudly in speeches while private jets, luxury hotels, and four-star requirements appeared quietly in expenses and staff correspondence. The problem was not success. It was selling luxury as solidarity and expecting the public to applaud the disguise. Trump introduced Gloria Reyes, a bakery owner in Corona who had worked 19 years and rose at 4 every morning to make bread. Gloria represented the people whose labor AOC invoked whenever she needed applause, donations, or protection from scrutiny. She washed her sheets at the laundromat across the street and worried about rent, not whether hotel linens met a preferred thread count. A woman in a diner uniform nodded because she understood swollen feet, rising prices, early alarms, and the arithmetic of survival. That small nod carried more judgment than partisan shouting because it came from someone who recognized the difference between representing workers and using them. By then, AOC's opening insult about Trump's father's fence had collapsed into a sequence of facts she could not control. The fence led to buildings, the buildings led to results, the results led to crime statistics, and Munich exposed the same weakness on foreign policy. The private jet, the Vidara bill, the four-star demand, and the thread count email then attacked the authenticity she relied on when facts failed. Trump removed the laughter from his voice, slowed his pace, and signaled that the next subject would not concern hypocrisy alone. Gloria's donor money was about to lead the room into companies, federal filings, campaign classifications, and questions that could not be answered with another speech about Queens. He removed the humor because campaign finance needed no theatrical fog, and he wanted every number to remain exposed. He cited $900,000 from AOC's campaign paid to Brand New Congress LLC, connected to former aide Saikat Chakrabarti. Federal filings described those payments as strategic consulting, a phrase that sounded ordinary while concealing what the company reportedly performed. Chakrabarti had publicly said the operation handled fundraising and volunteer activity, functions resembling campaign machinery rather than outside advice. Trump's point was merciless. When reported labels do not match actual work, the issue stops being branding and becomes compliance. He stressed that federal forms are not social media captions where language can redirect attention and supporters fill gaps. Campaign reports exist to tell donors, regulators, and voters where money went, why it moved, and what service was purchased. Calling operational work consulting does not become accurate because the softer term sounds safer or because allies dislike the person questioning it. Trump cited a former FEC commissioner who said the evidence justified civil investigation and could warrant criminal review by federal authorities. Those words carried weight because they came from someone who had administered campaign rules, not a rival improvising accusations for applause. Trump then moved to March 2026 and 3 payments totaling $18,725 to Dr. Brian B. in Massachusetts. The filings labeled their purpose leadership training, language designed to sound professional, developmental, and routine inside a political organization. Trump said Dr. B was a psychiatrist, not a leadership consultant, and argued that the service appeared to involve therapy. That distinction mattered because donor money does not lose legal significance when a campaign replaces one description with another. If the payments covered therapy, leadership training was misleading. If they covered training, the campaign needed records proving that service. Trump brought Gloria Reyes back because financial abstractions become harder to excuse when attached to the worker who earned each dollar. Gloria had sent $20 from bakery wages believing she was supporting someone who claimed to fight for people living like her. She rose before dawn, measured ingredients, paid bills, watched rent increase, and trusted campaign money would finance work she understood. Part of those donations reached a psychiatrist beneath a label she would never have interpreted as therapy. Gloria did not know when she contributed, Trump said, but after this broadcast, she understood what the filing claimed and why. Across the table, AOC looked toward her attorney, but his pen stayed on the legal pad, and his eyes stayed lowered. That refusal carried its own message because lawyers know when a televised answer can create more exposure than disciplined silence. Earlier, AOC had brushed counsel aside like a fighter too confident to need protection, but now she accepted his steadying hand. Her posture changed from confrontation to stabilization, from a politician controlling the room to a client measuring each sentence. Trump did not need to describe the fear because cameras recorded it between her searching eyes and her attorney's face. Then came an announcement only a sitting president could deliver with the force of executive knowledge behind the words. Trump said the 2019 FEC complaint had ended in a 3-3 deadlock, not through a finding clearing AOC on the merits. A deadlock is not vindication, and he emphasized that distinction because political statements routinely erase procedural weakness for public consumption. With a newly constituted commission, he said, the previous barrier no longer guaranteed protection while the March 2026 complaint remained active. Two complaints now confronted her, and his impeachment joke only sharpened the seriousness hidden beneath the room's laughter. The gallery laughed briefly, then turned silent as reporters stopped drafting commentary and began sending alerts to editors and producers. Presidential confirmation of active proceedings could not be dismissed as another insult clip because consequences would continue after cameras turned away. The facts would move through newsrooms, legal offices, donor circles, and opposition teams long after the stage lights cooled. AOC's staff could attack Trump's motives, but motive could not erase payment totals, filing categories, public admissions, or pending complaints. The spectacle she had designed around his upbringing had become a live inventory of her own political and legal vulnerabilities. AOC stood because retreat would have looked worse, and she returned to language that had carried her through previous confrontations. She spoke about minimum wage, rent, childcare, hospital closures, failing schools, flooded subways, and the queens she claimed to serve. The speech was forceful and familiar, but it was also built to move past every specific issue Trump had placed before her. She attacked Jamaica estates again because class imagery was safer than filings, and biography offered more room than federal requirements. Trump waited until she claimed service to Queens, then cut directly through the speech with two words: crime rate. The interruption was devastating because it returned everyone to the first unanswered question and exposed the speech as deliberate avoidance. Trump again demanded the crime rate in the district she invoked as proof of authenticity and moral authority. 40 minutes had passed, enough time for staff with phones, databases, and federal access to place one number before her. Surprise was gone as an excuse, and confusion no longer looked temporary or forgivable. Either she still did not know, or she knew and understood that saying it aloud would confirm the increase Trump had tied directly to her tenure. AOC gave no number, and the second silence was worse because it transformed an initial lapse into a verdict on preparation. Trump repeated the 70% increase and contrasted his knowledge from Mar-a-Lago with her ignorance while representing Queens. He said the borough needed numbers, not clapbacks, reducing her political style to the weapon that had opened the evening and trapped her. The gallery stopped behaving like an audience and started weighing the moment like a jury hearing the same question twice. As AOC stood without an answer, Trump prepared to abandon every joke and tell her what Queens now required from her. He dropped the showmanship completely, and the missing grin changed the room more than another punchline could have. He spoke not as the president performing for cameras, but as one child of Queens addressing another about a borough both claimed to understand. He acknowledged AOC's talent, her ability to fill rooms, move people, raise money, and make supporters believe change was possible. Then he asked what that talent had produced beyond Instagram, TikTok, Munich, private jets, luxury hotels, and managed symbolism. The question was brutal because it measured enormous influence against results and exposed how visibility had delivered so little. Trump returned to Queens and placed his father's record beside AOC's brand: buildings against slogans, doors against clips, keys against applause. He admitted the fence because denial would have weakened him, then argued that Fred Trump created apartments where working families lived and raised children. AOC had spent years turning the fence into evidence of moral distance. But Trump turned it into a comparison she could not escape. His father, he said, had built more for Queens from behind that fence than she had built before every camera. The room had already watched her fail twice on her district's basic number. Then Trump said, "Go home, Congresswoman," and immediately made clear he was not repeating the old "send her back" slogan. He meant Queens, not exile, and told her to return without a photo opportunity, staged event, campaign crew, or prepared speech. He told her to learn the crime rate, the rent, Gloria's name, and what 4 in the morning looked like inside a Corona bakery. His voice became plain, almost private, stripping the exchange of spectacle and leaving only an accusation of distance. Queens needed her, he said, but only if she returned and learned the place beyond her empty national slogans. The room did not applaud because applause would have cheapened what had happened, and everyone seemed to recognize that instinctively. Instead, the audience exhaled with the stillness of people who had stopped watching a contest and started forming a judgment. A woman in the fourth row wiped her eyes, not for Trump and not for AOC, but for the borough reduced to numbers no one could soften. Her tears belonged to the bus, the laundromat, the bakery, the rent notice, and the workers who understood survival more intimately than thread count. That reaction carried no party label, which made it politically dangerous for AOC. The moderator invited AOC to deliver a closing statement, and she stood because silence would have looked like surrender. She spoke about her mother, the Bronx, working families, justice, and the values that had built her career. The words were familiar, polished, emotionally correct, and completely disconnected from the specific questions the evening had forced open. She did not mention the crime rate, Munich, the FEC complaints, the psychiatrist, the private jet, the hotels, or the filing labels. After 90 minutes of numbers, a speech about values sounded like what politicians use when facts become too dangerous to address directly. Trump remained seated and did not add another shot, which from him was more striking than another attack could have been. He had finished, knew he had finished, and allowed the silence to carry what repetition would only weaken. Behind the stage, AOC's communications director stared at a prepared statement about confronting Trump's privileged upbringing and realized it answered the wrong event. The town hall had begun with his fence, but ended with her district, her spending, her preparation, and her record. He deleted the statement because no language about motive could erase what 11 million people had watched unfold live. The first clip to explode online was the fence exchange, AOC's insult, Trump's laugh, and the pivot from biography to results. It reached tens of millions because the laugh neutralized the attack before the insult could harden into the victory she expected. The second clip showed Trump asking for the crime rate twice, 40 minutes apart, while AOC failed both times to provide it. Viewers shared it not as partisan theater, but as a competence test for someone representing a district she invoked. The third clip lasted longer because "go home" sounded like advice, not expulsion, and came completely unexpectedly. AOC's office later described the event as a spectacle meant to distract from failures on housing, healthcare, and immigration. The statement attacked the reason for the confrontation while refusing to address the evidence produced during it. It did not answer the crime question, the Munich transcript, the travel expenses, the four-star standard, or the campaign finance complaints. The FEC confirmed through ordinary procedural channels that the complaints remained under active review, making avoidance harder to sustain. The issue had moved beyond one television night and into legal, political, and donor consequences that no communications memo could simply outlast. "Silly girl" became shorthand for unpreparedness disguised as irony, and rivals began using the phrase without naming its source. A supplemental complaint cited contradictions between claims and campaign spending, using the town hall footage as a map of weaknesses. In Corona, a local challenger held a church basement meeting and opened by saying she knew the crime rate, the rent, and the price of eggs. The sentence was not elegant or viral, but it contained the one thing AOC had failed to provide on the stage available. 30 people asking whether their representative still knew them was the beginning of something. At 4 a.m, Gloria Reyes unlocked her bakery and began the work she had performed for 19 years. She had watched the "go home" clip repeatedly, not because she supported Trump, but because she recognized the truth inside the instruction. Gloria knew the cost of flour, rent, gas, labor, and the $20 donations she had sent with faith in someone fighting for her. She mixed water, salt, yeast, and flour while Queens remained where it had always been, waiting for representation that knew its numbers and its people. 2 kids from Queens had taken the stage, but only one had come home.